days, right? So, this concept of that line, be the economist of choice, that comes from Gary Keller, pretty sure, or he uses it. And, what it really refers to is the notion of, well, here's my opinion of it anyway, is that when you unpack what we're doing as real estate agents, as realtors, right? We are, really financial advisors of sorts in a large part. I mean, so, one example of that is like we have a fiduciary responsibility to take seriously. And so do financial advisors when they're dealing with somebody's money. And the reason I go to that point is that for most people, and I've said this before, I think, in the few weeks I've been doing this, for most people, buying or selling or investing in real estate, whether it's a home or an investment strictly, like that's a large part of their nest egg, of their like overall net worth. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of money in this region, but for the everyday consumer, so to speak, like their home and the equity in their home is their retirement in a way. Or they're, like I said, they're a large part of their net worth. Now, again, don't get me wrong, even average consumer, let's just say they work for a corporation or whatever, where they have a 401k and they've been there, 20, 30 years, whatever it is, like, sure, they'll have that. And that's like, probably a sizable, amount at this point, based on that length. So, they'll have that, and then they'll also have the equity in their home. So like, these are major financial aspects that people are dealing with when they're dealing with their real estate transactions. So Gary Keller saying being the economist of choice, now it goes to, okay, there's the individual level of how important real estate is from a value standpoint for pretty much everybody. And then there's like, when you look at the economy overall, real estate's a huge factor in it. Like just real estate like every billionaire or whatever, right, has a huge investment in real estate in their portfolio. Guarantee it. Like find me a billionaire out there where, they don't have real estate holdings. That's a very rare scenario. And then any, again, like you went to the extreme at the billionaire concept, but just any level of wealth, there's typically real estate involved in that. And then, so now break it down to where just think about, the economy itself and all the different, facets that real estate itself creates, right? I'm not even talking about just like our industry and realtors, I'm talking about construction and things like that, home building, home remodeling. Just go to Home Depot on any given weekend, Saturday morning, right? And that's all dealing with real estate essentially, right? Like the supplies in there to do whatever you got to do to your house or property. Like there's just so many ancillary, factors that are not even factors, topics, whatever you want to call it, that come off of, this basic human need of shelter. And again, that's what we're operating in, right? As realtors is the licensed ability to help people with their basic need of shelter. So essentially, when you get real broad with what we're doing. So real estate is such an important part of economics and the economy overall, that line, be the economist of choice for your people, is really where it comes from, because you have the literal ability to be that type of economic resource for your database, and here we are tying it into what we've talked about the last three episode, so to speak, right? Is, here we're tying and how you can actually communicate with your database is the topic essentially. Because, most people don't have whatever, a degree in finance, much less a general understanding of how the economy works. Right? It's just it's kind of dry when you get down to it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that get excited about this, or a lot of people that are in, whatever profession and they're savvy and things like that. I'm not coming from the angle of like, the opportunity is that everybody's, complete idiot and doesn't know anything. But the point is that you're in a very powerful sector of the economy with the industry that you're in. And therefore you have the ability to essentially relate to economics and the economy and wealth and all that, at a pretty high level without being a financial advisor and having to, dive into, 401ks and stuff like that. So believe it or not, like we're impacting people's wealth with what we do. So the more that you're able to actually carry a basic conversation around that, the better off you're going to be. And again, now back to like the notion of, hey, how am I going to provide value when I'm dealing with my people? If you're talking about their wealth or aspects around it, what more value can you provide, right? If you're finding a way to show them, hey, this house that you're going to buy, for example, was worth 100,000 10 years ago and it's 200,000 now, and okay, with that trend, maybe it's worth 300,000 in another 10 years. That's a lot of money for people. I guess that's one of the main points I want to make is we're talking about a lot of money for a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people out there to where that sort of money is just kind of a drop in a bucket. But I guess with that logic, even more important to kind of be fluent, to a degree in this topic. Now, to further that concept to be the economist of choice, what I don't mean is like, don't be intimidated by that. Okay. Don't feel that you have to like have, again, a degree in finance or be a finance professor to know or to be confident enough to get into a conversation that matters, that's going to provide value for your people. And what I wanted to do today is just kind of talk about some of the basic talking points that will essentially give you the base from an education standpoint to not have to like run away from the conversation, essentially. That's what I mean by like that be the economist of choice, is just get into an engaging conversation with somebody versus like, having to tuck your tail between your legs and walking away. It's like, oh my God, this guy's talking about inflation and I don't even know what that really means. I'm hearing about it in the news all the time and that's intimidating and I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. Right? So that's kind of how to relate to this notion or this topic, is not like, having to figure out how to do calculus, but just have a base understanding of concepts so that you can then relate to whatever's going on out there in the market, like now, or just, how what we do affects people's livelihood, essentially. I'll take a time out there and kind of, see if there's any questions around that or like let me phrase it this way. Anybody having confidence issues with what I'm talking about? And is there anything specific that you would want to address today? I'll kind of give everybody the opportunity to do that before I kind of go into what I wanted to get at. So does everybody feel pretty confident, pretty good about what I'm saying in terms of like, we should be able to carry a conversation and not run away from one when it comes down to markets or economics or finances or stuff like that? Good. Cool.
Jason, I have just one thing. I have no problem having general financial conversations, but what I think we're less confident about is staying current with the types of financing that is available, because buyers may be keeping in contact with their lender or they may not be. And they may have been in contact with their lender, but they really don't understand what they're hearing. So what they're conveying back, it's, it's rough to want to bug their lender, and especially when it's somebody that we haven't ever heard of. Not to mention hard to get a hold of them. So rather than chasing from that direction, I wonder if there's just like some kind of a central reference that's kept updated, where the different programs that are available and the terms and conditions are kept up to date. Sometimes having a quick reference like that is great to be able to say, hey, you could actually qualify for USDA because we're in the right address for it. Or, you can't qualify for that VA because of, some random fact.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think there should be just kind of a general, like, whether it's a page flyer or, some resource folder or whatever you want to call it, of just like, here's a crash course on the different loan products and what they mean and how they work, right? Because like you mentioned USDA, for example, right? I mean, I remember where there was a time starting off in the business, I had no idea what that was. So, I mean, I think, once you get experience in this business, you take a lot for granted, right? And I think it would be kind of a good thing to just make sure that we have those resources and the training around them, readily available. And what I mean by that is just in the sense that, like, it's 10 p.m. on a whatever night, and you're stuck and need to pull a resource. Like, having that sort of thing is good, because I wouldn't expect that you're going to get a hold of any loan officer at that time, right?
Yeah,
taking a step further, having partnerships that are solid, to where, even like, I'll put it this way, the lender that we work with, I can approach her and ask her questions even about people that she's not working with, right? Just because there's a certain amount of business that come, that's tied into that, to where she doesn't mind, right? But having a solid relationship with a lender that you can really have on call is a key piece to this business, and across the board with any vendor, right? Attorneys, home inspectors, etc. But I think it would be good to have that sort of resource. Sophie, if you're listening, is that something that you can kind of like see if we have at both regions, market center level?
Yeah, for sure. I can check in.
Cool. Linda, what did you want to add something, or what? I don't think I answered your question.
Oh, no, you did. I was wondering if there was already a resource, because I mean, what I've always wanted to do and just never had the time or the resources, or I've always have my team so busy. I've always wanted to create an electronic portal where lenders, even if it's your preferred lender, whatever, can go in and drop whatever information they want. We've got a deal, we're offering we're offering a rate drop, or we're offering a quarter point for this or that. Be able to go and just update that whenever they want, because that helps them, as well as that co-edification. I've always wanted to create something like that electronically, so that it's a 24/7 access. And then, down the road, that could be a complete API to hook up to app and everything else. I just don't have the time or the bandwidth to do that ourselves.
Sure. Yeah. So, what I'll say, I think I love the idea, first of all. Okay. I will say, I think it can be a little dangerous from their perspective, just because what they drop in that portal today very well could change by Monday. Right. So it's a little sticky in that regard. But to your point too, like, so say if we weren't at a brokerage where, like, we're going to task our leadership with developing this type of resource, if we didn't have it, like, I'm thinking of just like, something that you like, a guide that you create yourself too. Like, different levels of agents in the business, right? Like if you're just starting off, like a good thing to do would be like, whether it's a spreadsheet or whatever, but like, okay, conventional loan, some notes and thoughts about that. FHA, VA, USDA, all the different products and just all the different knowledge that you can have, so that A, you're learning, and B, when you forget or don't remember, you have somewhere that you can easily go back to. So I think it's a great concept. I think, getting in depth with like real-time updates can be sticky, because then it just comes down to consistency as to whether or not, somebody's constantly updating it. Because the last thing you want is like something to go to a client with, a certain product or program advertised, and then, it's 3 months old and now that's no longer being advertised and client's pissed type of thing. So,
Yeah, you definitely can't do rates. You can't do
Yeah.
margins. You can't
Right.
do stuff like that. You could only do like, programs with your, all your regular CYA claims and stuff like that,
Yep.
the kind of stuff they put out in other kinds of ads already.
Yep.
But yeah, I've always wanted to do it. I think it's a good idea. Just doing it.
Go ahead, Chris.
Actually, I hate to say this, I did a quick search, and if you go to Rocket Mortgage, they actually have a really nice thing on the types of mortgages. So conventional, fixed rate, adjustable, FHA, USDA, VA, and jumbo. And it's pretty much basic information.
Yeah. Which, guys, that's a segue into a topic I wanted to address here today. And thank you, Chris. But here's the topic, right? Preparing for this course, or whatever class today, right? Like, I literally have Google pulled up in the screen next to me in case you guys throw anything at me that I'm not well versed on. Okay. So like, I'm not afraid to admit it. And that's the way that you guys need to operate too. Like, it's just a wealth of information out there in the World Wide Web these days to take advantage of. So, again, don't feel like you need to attack this as like, all right, I gotta, start, reading, Ray Dalio or whatever, and, big time economic books. It's just like, get a base knowledge so that you can walk into, happy hour tonight. And, if somebody's picking your brain on inflation relative to the real estate market, you actually know what the hell inflation means, if you're not confident at it right now. So that's kind of the overall like message to this course, is because it gets said a lot, that line of be the economist of choice. That doesn't mean like you have to be, spitting out calculus formulas and the internal rate of return. And I just did. So here's what I'll add to this too, to prove the point. Not to be, arrogant or whatever. Like, I have a degree in finance. I never went to Wall Street. You held a gun to my head right now and told me to do freshman entry level math or whatever, I would be shot in the head. It doesn't matter. It's just like a base understanding that I can use to carry a conversation from there. So it's not about like getting so detailed and in the weeds that you overwhelm yourself, because that's what can happen if you get too crazy with it, But it's just again, like my story is like, yeah, I for whatever reason got a degree in finance, never wanted to go on Wall Street, didn't become a financial advisor. Feel like I have a pretty good business financial background because of it, and it allows me to be confident in conversations with clients. Is essentially the win from that. So get yourself to that point, not where you have a degree in finance, but that you're just confident to anything that's thrown at you. You can, again, not have to walk away from that conversation, is essentially the point here. So I'm going to get into some specifics right now. And before I was, Anthony and I were fortunate enough to be in Gary Keller's mastermind. It was the end of September, so it was a few weeks ago at this point. But he always kind of takes a that economist hat on with these whether it's family reunion or whatever, and throws a lot out there statistic wise and concept wise. I pulled up my notes from that meeting because there was a lot in there that's good to dive into. But first thing I want to describe is the topic that markets operate in cycles. Okay. So you can take that as like what goes up must come down, or just understand that just everything has an upside and a downside to it, and then the in between. And it may not be, the downside is like back down to where it was before it went up, but generally speaking, everything kind of has a roller coaster ride to it. If you look at, any sort of financial indicator, stock market, whatever it is, like it's going to be zigzagging, right? And those are what I mean by cycles, meaning that like, so like let's apply it to right now. Tough to predict the future as always. We don't have a crystal ball, but I guess the prediction would be last year was the peak of the upward trend in the cycle, right? So we peaked, and right now we're coming down. Okay. And we're probably not at the bottom end of that cycle right now. Okay. So whatever the bottom looks like, eventually it'll bottom out. And that doesn't mean like, holy crap, doom and gloom, everybody lost all the home value appreciation they just gained, but it's just the bottom before it starts to rise again. Okay. And, without getting political at all or anything like that in this conversation, because that's not what it's about, but like, that's just how markets operate. It's just how the powers that be need it to be. Okay. People are going to make their money on the upside. Very powerful people are going to make money on the downside. And then again, okay. And, unfortunately there's, suffering on both ends of that for every, for a lot of people, kind of that aren't in this, whatever you want to call it, elitist category type of thing. Again, not getting political at all. Okay. Just kind of economic reality. But, so what's happening now is like, due to inflation mainly, the federal government needs the economy to recede. They need pricing to come down so that the everyday consumer can catch up. And that's what's happening when you hear about the Federal Reserve, raising interest rates. They're trying to make, things essentially are getting too expensive. And if the cost of money is more expensive, it should kind of cool things down economy wise and cause things to level out where they want it to be. This is by design from a historical perspective. This isn't like something that just started in the last few years. So it's important to understand that. So, market cycles, I'm a big believer in everything is cyclical. There's going to be an upside. There's going to be a downside. How bad those downsides look is when you get into those terms like the Great Depression and the Great Recession and stuff like that. And we could, I'm also not trying to scare the crap out of everybody today, but we could be in one of those historical times right now coming up. Okay. And why this is so important is that it's such a topic right now, the economy, whether it's just the news that people are watching or people are feeling it, right? Groceries are expensive. Gas is expensive. God only knows what's going to happen with your heating and energy bills this winter, right? So this is real life that we're in right now, right? So you're going to want to be a resource to people to lean on so that they, you're somebody that they're comfortable with talking about this stuff. And it's not like you got to scare the crap out of them. Don't. But just to like, if you could bring a knowledge of like, well, here's how it works, maybe that soothes them a little bit, But but there's, the other kind of basic, that's pretty basic, the cyclical nature of economics and markets. The other basic is just supply and demand. Like, economics 101 is supply and demand. Like, that should have been the first thing that I talked about. That's the first thing you learn in economics is supply and demand. And when you look at the market that we've been in the last 5 years, classic story of supply and demand. Demand through the roof because interest rates were so low and other factors too. And the supply has not been able to meet the demand. So therefore, we've been in a seller's market. Those that have the supply are going to be able to more or less dictate what they want for price. And that's how it goes with if you're selling widgets or whatever, right? If you have the supply and your demand is through the roof, you're going to be able to charge more if you're selling widgets. If you have the supply and the demand is low, you're going to have to find where the demand agrees with your price so you can sell your widgets. It's the same thing with real estate, right? And right now, what's interesting today, October 21st, you would think if I were, if this were a year ago, October 21st, 2021, and you would have told me that, because at that point we had what? I mean, we were under 4%, right? Interest rate last year, this time. Pretty sure, I'm trying to think. So you call it right around there. If you would have told me the interest rates would have been 7.5% and we'd still be technically in a seller's market, I would have told you to go kick rocks. Right? Because that's an effect of demand. It becoming that much more expensive to buy a home because of the interest rates. I would have told you, like, hang on. Because it's, it'd be pretty friggin' ugly. And don't get me wrong, like, there's a lot of stress in the market right now, but the fact that we're still in this seller's market, and don't get me wrong, it's in spots and it's cooling, and there's certainly examples where homes don't sell with delayed negotiations and this and that. But the reality is we're still in a seller's market. There's still more demand than there is homes for sale out there. And let's talk about that. If anybody feels differently, let's talk. But the reality is like, we're still getting multiple offers. Homes are still selling quickly. And what I mean by quickly, keep in mind, before 2017, you were happy if your home sold in 45 or 60 days. Who's been in the market new since 2017? Somebody, tell me. I mean, how many people here haven't been around for longer than 5 years? So, this was the way it was, is just, it took 60 days on average to sell a home. Can you imagine that? Right? Like, it sounds, you're probably looking at me like I got 3 heads right now, like this guy's full of crap. That, national average, you'd be happy if you were a seller and it only took 2 months to sell your home. That's a buyer's market. So, right, it's just the scale of supply and demand. I mean, what I guess to scale, like the last few years have seemed like there's 100 buyers for every 1 home for sale, and 100 qualified, motivated buyers at that. Right? So now we may be at, I don't know, 20 to 1. I don't know. I'm making numbers up at this point, but just to give you an example of the scale of supply and demand that we've experienced. It used to be so much demand, and now there's less demand, but still enough, even with the rates, to where we're still in a seller's market. Now, ultimately, this could all be more of a supply problem than anything, in that there's just not enough homes available for sale to meet, an adequate level of demand. And that's kind of been the story since the, show in 2008, or since then, since the recession then, And this is more of a national thing than our local market, but like nationally, homes have been underbuilt, meaning new homes, newly constructed homes coming on the market since 2008 have been underbuilt by like a million plus every year since 2008. And that's just started to level out in the last couple of years to where like now it's like almost even with what the expectation should be. But so there was a 10-year run of a million plus homes that didn't get built that should have been built in order to support the demand. So there's 10 million homes right there that we're short on nationally. And think of this in cities like big cities, like, you know, there's stories of like, you know, like bigger cities like Houston, Texas, for example. Everywhere you go, it's like there's a new neighborhood with 100 homes being built in it. Like every quarter of a mile you drive down the road, it seems like. And even that level is not meeting that supply is not meeting the demand. So that's an aspect that's led to this extreme seller's market. The super low interest rates just made it, you know, pretty easily to make luxury decisions as a buyer in the last couple of years. And I'm a big believer that like post COVID, you know, there's like a home has been more important than ever, arguably, just because coming off that 3, 4, 6 month stretch or whatever of like being stuck in your home, or imagine being in a bigger city where like you're stuck in a 400 square foot apartment with a roommate. Like, I don't care what it costs. Get me the hell out of here has been kind of a notion. And for our local markets, like, all right, I don't really need to move. I don't really want to be stuck in my house with my family in a small house again, just in case. So yeah, let's go get the big boy house. And I can do that because the rate's so low. I'm a big believer, and that's part of what's happened in the market leading up to this year in the last couple of years since 2020. Like rates are low. I got equity because homes are selling at good clips. And yeah, I want an extra 1,000 square feet, or I want that pool, or I want whatever, right? Like people treasure their home more than ever, I think is a big thing. Another aspect leading to the supply shortage is there's a lot of investors in the market that are purchasing homes that then get rented and don't go to homeowners. So essentially, you know, taking supply away from the demand for the everyday homeowner. I've got an example right down the street from my office. There's probably 10 new townhomes that went up. You know, just like that. It feels like they started building them 3 weeks ago, and it's, you know, been a couple months, but they're all sided now. They look beautiful, right? They look like they would be, you know, $200,000 townhomes if they would sell easily. And, you know, certain areas like 300,000-400,000. That type of look to them, newly constructed. Those are all going to be rented. None of them for sale. So there's 10 units in our market that aren't going to homeowners. So this supply and demand story is a tale as old as time, and that's really what's led to the market of the last 5 years, and especially the market in the last couple of years. And if you add it all up, it makes sense as to, again, that story of like, okay, if you would have told me it'd be 7.5% interest today, a year ago, I would have told you like, okay, am I applying for a job somewhere at that point? But we're still undersupplied to where the demand is still there. And that creates, you know, stability, at least transaction stability in the market. My point is, like, if you would have told me that, I would have expected 40,000 transaction size to drop to 10. And that's not the case. We're going to see a significant drop this year, but not anything that, like, you know, would lead me to, you know, tell you guys to find a new career. Questions so far? All right, so I'm going to go kind of, you know, to please, as always, stop me, because especially with this stuff, like, and especially me explaining it, like, I'm not expecting it to be clear. Okay, so please just call timeout if it's like, what the hell are you talking about? All right. So, I'm going to get in my notes from Gary Keller right now. And these are some economic, bullet points to kind of take with you moving forward for a general understanding of how things work. Okay. So first point is that there's really three key numbers that the federal government is going to keep an eye on to, determine if the economy is healthy or not. Okay. The first one being unemployment. Okay. People are working, right? Fairly obvious. The key number for that is 5%. So anytime we're above 5%, we're on our way to an unemployment problem. Anytime we're below that, they're happy, the powers that be. Right now, we're below that. So that number's in check. The second number is GDP, gross domestic product. Essentially, are people spending money? And don't ask me what the metric means for this, but it's 2 is the magic number. Okay. So anytime we're above 2, we're doing great. People are spending money. Everybody's happy. Anytime we're below 2, depending on how low it is, could be alarming. And right now, we're significantly below that. So that's alarming. The third number is inflation. Are we keeping up with inflation? Are we keeping up with rising costs? And right now, obviously, it's a hot button topic. The number for that the Fed wants is 2%. And we're, above 8 right now. And that's really not good, at least for America. Okay. Because here's a story I'll tell. This came from Gary, but have some perspective around these economic issues in comparison to the rest of the world, for what it's worth anyway. And I'm going to say Turkey, and I don't mean your Thanksgiving turkey is going to be 70% more expensive this year, although it may be. But the country of Turkey has 70% inflation right now, and we're at 8%. So if you think it's painful for us, imagine what it's like in these other, less developed, less powerful countries. Okay. But back to those 3 numbers, anytime those numbers aren't in check, that's where the federal government comes in and tries to fix it. Okay. And tries, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, figuring out what they can do to get things in check. Next point would be back to GDP. Anytime there's 2 negative quarters in a row, then a recession is coming. The R word is coming. And guess what, guys? Quarter 1 and quarter 2 are negative. We're already in it right now. And again, I'm not coming to scare the crap out of you today, right? This is all educational purposes. Did you, Irene, you good? Sorry. So, nobody wants to hear it, but we're really already in a recession. It just hasn't I don't think, if it's tough to say, how bad will it get, right? But by definition of what, economists and the federal government looks at, they're acting like we're already in a recession. Now, important to understand the word recession, get to the root word of recede. That's the key. And that's what the federal government wants to happen right now, is just for things to recede and cool off and calm the hell down a little bit, so it doesn't get any further out of control and we don't end up being Turkey with 70% inflation, or, relative to our housing market, that nobody can afford a house because no matter what the interest rate, homes in Gates, where I'm sitting right now, sell for $1 million when they used to be $100,000. So there's a balancing effect that has to happen to ultimately keep democracy intact. And again, not getting political, but what was the line here? Shoot. It's the government's job to protect the middle class for democracy to thrive. Okay. Does us no good if the elite, whatever, is just killing it and everybody else isn't. So there's a balancing act that's in play. And that's what, why a recession is necessary at this point, why we need things to recede, because it's not going to be sustainable for, all of us to go out and buy gas and get to work at $20 a gallon. And how are we going to heat our houses this winter if our heating bills are on average $1,500 a month? And that's why the government steps in to try to calm these things down when it gets to the level that it's at. Again, none of this is political, guys. This is economical, economics. So Jay Papasan was on that call, who was, is like Gary's right-hand man to a degree, and, co-wrote MREA and One Thing and all that stuff, right? So pretty powerful guy, pretty sound, smart guy. He referred to it as, the problem of when the federal government steps in. They have good intentions. They want to help everybody. Again, democracy thrives when everybody's doing good. Is that they're really just guessing with how to fix things. And he used the analogy of, it's like playing the crane game at the arcade where you're lowering the crane and trying to grab the stuffed animal. That's what they do. Sometimes they get the reward, sometimes they don't. So there's going to be the misses with any circumstantial events like this where things are trying to get fixed. It'd be great if everything was just hunky-dory and, there's just balance across the economy throughout time. Back to point one, that's not how it works. Historically speaking, throughout history, everything is going to operate on a cycle. There's going to be an uptime, there's going to be a downtime, there's going to be times in the middle. You can't change that. If it changed, we wouldn't be America. Because obviously you don't want to just be on a downward spiral all the time. And there's implications of it being just, kind of where we're at right now, of it just being all the way good all the time. So, they either overstimulate or they pull back too hard is what ends up happening. And then there's the corrective periods within that. Look at guys, hopefully what they're doing, what's happening right now, works in as painless manner as possible is essentially the goal. To where they figure out the formula, things get in check. We get to the down end of the cycle as quickly as possible, and then we're rising back up. That's the intent. Back to the actual supply side of our industry. And I think this statistic just came out today. Actually, I saw, when you see these news articles that we're seeing already, and we're especially going to see come January about, the stats of 2022 and the housing market and what it did. We're already seeing it where it's double-digit percentages of home sales drop, 13%, whatever it's going to be. There's an element in play of understanding what that means, in that it's a year-over-year comparison. So when you see that news article, real estate market dropped 20% 2022, that means compared to what it was at 2021. Okay. And it's important to understand 2021 was a near all-time high in terms of home selling, pricing, everything. So yeah, when the market's correcting, when it's coming on out of the peak end of the cycle, those statistics are going to be negative. Because again, you can't just keep going up in perpetuity forever. So here's what's going to happen this year is that and this was, this data is already old from 3 weeks ago, because at that point, the prediction was that 5.1 million homes would sell nationwide in 2022. I think I saw today that they're at like 4.73 is the prediction. And that's what Gary said. He's like, I think the number is going to be in the fours. And this is coming off, it was like 6.1 in 2021. Okay. So there's going to be a million less homes, a million plus, maybe even 1.5 million homes, less homes that sell overall in America in 2022 compared to 2021. That's substantial. That's potentially 3 million transaction size. So this is big time stuff. It's just, again, have the perspective to know that all of those percentage statistics are coming off an all-time high. So it's not like the 5 million homes selling is like, oh crap, we got a major problem. It's just like, okay, yeah, we're off the highs. Again, we're still operating in the basic human need of shelter, where people, what I mean by that is death, divorce, marriage, babies, jobs, relocation, pay raises, whatever, require people to move. We're not like, our industry is more or less recession proof because of that. It's important to understand that. The concept of like, there's never going to be a year where no homes sell, and that's on the extreme example of things, but even enough home selling to, provide for your way of life, if you're running a business the way that it should be, that's never going to happen. You're in a powerful industry. You may as well be working on Wall Street. It never stops. You just got to figure out how to take advantage of it. And what I mean by that, when, the stock market tanks, it's not like those guys pack it in. They're figuring out a way how to profit off of it. That's the same type of mindset that you need to be in. There's plenty of, this pie is big enough for all of us to eat, no matter how grim the news makes it sound, is a big point I want to make here. But 2022 is ultimately going to be the second or the third biggest drop in history. And the other two ranking would be the Great Depression and 2008, Great Recession. So we are in historical times right now. We're just also in that conversation because we're coming off very historical times on the upside of things. So yeah, call it what goes up, what must come down. I'd rather call it a market cycle, because I think that what goes up must come down becomes dangerous in terms of relative to our market. Like, and again, I don't have the crystal ball. It's dangerous to make predictions, but the story that I would tell for our market, at least in Rochester, is, here's what's happened in the last 5 years. Generally speaking, average price point, you were probably at, call it like 175,000 5 years ago. Well, last year, that same home probably listed for, I'm using round numbers, but 225. So a $50,000 increase in just 5 years is pretty much unheard of for our market. And that 225 listing may have sold for 275. Even more, right? We all have the stories. So my logic of, okay, that homeowner that bought at 275, yeah, if they have to sell in the next 2 years, they're probably going to be screwed. Okay. And that's why it's been so important to have the conversation around this topic. And again, the overall topic at hand, so that you know how to operate within your business. Like, we've been telling people like, hey, how long, last couple of years, how long you plan on owning this home for that you're making an offer on? 2 years. Don't buy it. Why? Market cycles. Not what goes up must come down, but if you are selling in the wrong end of the cycle, it could be painful. And here's how I relate to those numbers. In the bottom of that cycle, so the peak was 275. The other bottom was 170, 175. It was listed at 225. My prediction would be like, there'll be a time when that house is worth what it was listed for at 225. So that buyer that just bought, yeah, they may see a $50,000 drop in equity if they're having to sell. Otherwise, you got to treat your home almost like the 401k logic of or IRA or whatever. Like, don't even look at it. Like I'm not a financial advisor, but that's a piece of advice for what's coming. Just don't look at your IRA or 401ks in the next couple of years. If you can make some investment into it when things like get shaky, do it, because then it'll come back up. And the same logic here of 10 years from now, my prediction would be like, I think the worst case scenario, that same house is worth 275. And at that point, you have 10 years worth of equity or call it paying off your mortgage. So you have equity at that point. But I, would like to think too that maybe it's worth 300 at that point. I don't think we're in a region that in that example, 175 turns into 500,000 in the next 10 years. But there's a lot of upside to this region too, that I don't want to get into conspiracy theory stuff or whatever, but there's a lot going on for this area. Now, nationally, this would be a different conversation. You're in South Florida, you're in Southern California, whatever. Those are much more volatile markets. And yeah, they're used to, 2008, house was worth 600,000, then it dropped to 300,000. We just don't see those drops. We also don't see, this is why I always hedge my bet to say it's dangerous to make predictions. We also don't see the gains that we've seen in the last 5 years, typically. So, it sounds kind of goofy to advise you to talk out of both sides of your mouth, but there is a level of CYA that comes with this job. You're not here to guarantee anything. You're here to educate and give your opinions on things, and then let the people that you're working with decide what they want to do. Period. That's the job description. Gary Keller quote, booms cause busts, busts drive booms. That's the market cycle summed up right there. Because, when there's down times, we're sure as hell going to get out of it. And when there's up times, yeah, call it bubble bursting or call it, what goes up must come down. But it's just, everything is a cycle. Everything is up, up, down. The beauty of it, this is probably a bad visual. Over time, if you just look at the stock market, for example, this is what it looks like over time. Yes, it goes up and down, but look at where it goes overall. So if this is like a 50-year trend, that's what it looks like. So if you invested money 50 years ago, yeah, in that first 5 years, if you had to cash out because it was down and you panicked, well, you're kicking yourself now if you didn't put it back in, right? That's what I mean. Couple other quick hitters, talk about balanced market is 6 months of supply. We're nowhere near that. So that's and don't get me wrong, because I've been vocal about I'm not really a huge fan of the word shift. I've been saying that for the last year. Okay. We haven't shifted if you're just calling that by definition going from a seller's market to a buyer's market. We haven't shifted to that. Now, don't get me wrong, we're cooling, we're shifting, but we haven't even gotten to balance yet. And it's case by case, neighborhood by neighborhood, pocket by pocket type of stuff, even property to property. But we're not in a balanced market. We don't have 6 months of supply out there. Right now, nationally, you made the comment, we're inching, we're trending up towards 3. So we're getting there. I mean, it used to be, in the extreme end of it, it was, 1 or less for a time. That's just crazy. And again, that days on market statistic, for those that haven't been in the industry, longer than 2017. It was literally gear up, Mr. Seller. It's going to take 2 months to sell your home. I'll let you know when we got a showing. Like, we take for granted as agents how insane the market conditions have been for both sides, sellers and buyers. The buyers having to deal with it and sellers just being like, yeah, 75 showings in a 4-day period, and I get to choose which one of these 10 offers looks the best. It's obnoxious. It's crazy. You got to have the perspective to understand like what it's really been like and during this time, comparatively speaking. Now, I know I'm running over. I really want to address this topic. And I think, the topic is like these catchphrases that are going out there, right? Marry the house, date the rate. There's the interest rate on renting is 100%. There's others, right? My point to this topic is it's not that those are wrong, but you're wrong if you just throw that out there and don't bring any further logic into it. Meaning, like, if you don't explain what marry the house, date the rate means, and you just leave it at that, like you're just trying to make a pitch. You're doing sales at that point. This is intense stuff. Again, this is the biggest financial decision that most people have, or one of them. And if you're just throwing catchphrases out there that are on the, a freaking meme with the blonde lady and the cat or whatever you see, like, what? I mean, I'll say it. You're an asshole. Apologize. Don't run your business like that. You can say that in a manner of like, hey, I'm sure you've heard the term marry the house, date the rate. Here's what that means, because there's, rather than just send you a meme and leave it at that, here's what that means is that you have the ability, if you love this house and you're financially comfortable with it and you need to move, go ahead and do it. Here's why. We don't know what the interest rate's going to be 6 months from now when you really need to move, is what you're telling me. And this is a hypothetical circumstance. But if you really need to move within a year, I have no idea what the rate could be. And it could be lower. Okay. So understand that. But if you're settled into a house that you really want to be in and you're locked into a fixed rate, you're avoiding, it could be a 10% rate when you really need to buy. Okay. And then therefore a better situation, right? They're going to say yes. Okay. Well, here's what you can do on the back end of it. If you end up staying in this house and the rates drop to 5% 3 years from now, and you're looking at this house as a forever home, or as much as you can plan on it, refinance. Who knows? Maybe even pull equity out of it at that point and go put the pool in to really make it the forever home. And you're going to have now a pool, same loan balance potentially, and a lower monthly payment. That's what's meant by marry the house, date the rate. Bring the education to these concepts, because the concepts are right. Like interest rate on renting is 100%. Yeah, you're renting, you're paying your landlord's mortgage. You're paying his interest rate. And you're not building any equity. You have no investment. You're not technically paying interest, but you're not doing anything for yourself other than giving a roof over your head. What other catchphrases are going on out there? I'm trying to think. There's one more I feel like I've heard of. Anyway. That's my spiel, guys. I got time, so fire away. Hopefully I didn't scare anybody. Honest to God, this is a land of opportunity. Don't quote me on what the Warren Buffett quote is, but it's to paraphrase is essentially, there's more redistribution of wealth that happens in down markets, meaning, more people capitalize on that than up markets. And I think that's super relevant to this industry too. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be hard to pull off in our industry. You're going to have to do double, triple the amount of work to not grow your business, but maintain your business. And if you really, the opportunity is that, unfortunately, I mean, just Rochester alone, there's like 3,500 agents or something like that are on the board. Those that aren't having these conversations and surrounding themselves with this type of educational features and aren't applying themselves that much more and aren't doing more, they're not going to make it. And make it can mean like they're not going to grow, like guaranteed. If you don't apply yourself more, you're not going to grow in the market that's ahead. Okay. And I would argue that it's going to be tough for you to sustain the same level of business that you're used to. And I would also argue that there's a very high chance that you've just fail out of the industry as a result of inaction in what is going to be a difficult market. So the herd will thin and cream rises to the top. That's the opportunity for you guys. It's just going to take more. I mean, what I tell, our agent partners is, like, I don't mean to just sound like a jerk all the time, but guys, more. Like, it's going to be more. It should always be that if you're trying to level up your business and break through a ceiling. But, to just get to a position where you survive this market, you're going to have to do more. If you want to thrive out of it, you really got to do more. And if you're not in that mindset, chances are you will see some level of failure. And, I don't think anybody in this company should be subject to that, because there's enough out there to where you can help yourself to figure it out. But it takes action. Can I do to help? Anybody got any questions? All right.
Hey, Jason, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions, but with the marry the house, date the rate, I use that. I explain it as well, because I think it's super important for them to know about that option.
Yeah.
I have had a few of my clients say, yeah, but if I refinance, then, I have to pay closing cost again. And I think it's also important to, maybe talk to some of the different lenders that are out there, because even when my husband and I were refining, we went through the same company we had our mortgage through, because we were able to save a ton if you refi through the right or the same lender. The other thing that I've been trying to tell them too, or explain to them, is say, hey, why don't you talk with your loan officer, ask them what it looks like to buy your points down, have them run the 30-year amortization table at the interest rate now, versus coming up with a couple thousand, buying the rate down, and then looking at that 30-year amortization table. It might make sense for you. As much as you don't want to come out of pocket, it might make more sense for you to come a little bit more out of pocket to get that rate down.
100%.
Because ultimately, right? I mean, because I feel like the minute you say, yeah, you're going to have to pay more, but have your loan officer run those numbers. I mean, it's going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars at the end of that mortgage.
I mean, you're talking tens of thousands at the end of
right. Right. I mean, so just a different, just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying.
No,
because
100% relevant. And also, so a couple things to add to. I think the key with the marry the house, date the rate thing is like, you're actually married to the house and you don't get divorced from it. Because that's where refinancing, relevant to refinancing, is like, it's probably not going to make sense to refinance with a lower rate if you're planning on selling in the next year and a half.
Absolutely.
Right. So there's that aspect, and explaining it that way, when you're throwing that line out, is kind of my logic. And the whole the mortgage buy down concept is like, get yourself educated around that, guys, because that's about to take off. And it already has, really, because I spoke with our lender about it, just kind of prep it, because I want to approach her and be like, okay, before we go make a push for this, is this bad for you guys? Because I don't want to step on your toes, so to speak, right? Ultimately, it's about the client, and she's like, no, absolutely not. And in fact, her response was literally we always offer it. We always run the scenarios. 99% of people take advantage of it right now. So it's already here, where it's going to evolve as the market cools and shifts. Guys, this is a seller concession. Like, so if you have a listing that's not selling and your seller is not willing to give you a price reduction, get their permission to do some marketing around, hey, okay, you don't want to reduce. Can we at least just market, and this doesn't tie you to anything, that seller's willing to help provide a lower interest rate, something to that effect? And all it means for us contractually is a seller concession. And the way that the buy downs work, it typically gets like your most power, meaning like your rate is going to reduce the most after 1 point. At 2 point, which is a percentage of the sale price, right? At 2 points, it reduces significantly less. And the scale drops to where like buying 3 points, it ends up not really making sense, because the reduction from 0.2 to 0.3 ends up being so little that it's like, all right, I'm paying this amount now. I'm really not, it's not reducing my rate that much. So there's kind of like a cutoff between 1 and 2 points. So for a seller, okay, you don't want to reduce. I'm recommending that we need to reduce 5%. Why don't I do some creative marketing to where we may be able to catch somebody that sees value at your list price, and you only have to come off at 2%. That's what's going to start evolving. That was also, so that Gary Keller mastermind that I mentioned, the first half was everything I just rolled through economic wise. The second half was essentially that. That's how important it's going to be. And that's how forward leading we are within the industry at this company. And I'm already seeing examples. Like, I've been waiting to tee this up for our marketing. We just haven't had a freaking listing that hasn't sold yet. But like, I've seen, a loan officer at Prime just this week in our market advertise. You're going to see more and more of it. So if you're the hero who brings a concept to a seller or a buyer that isn't just a widely used concept, well, you're the hero. You're the expert at that point. And this is how it goes. Think about it, similar to escalation clauses. Nobody knew when escalation clauses first came on the scene. Like, I remember the conversation between Anthony and I, and we were like, what the hell is this guy trying to do? It's this guy's problem. Give me your best offer, It's this bullshit. That was the initial reaction to an escalation clause. And now it's like, man, you didn't do an escalation? What an idiot. The industry evolves. We're evolving. You sitting in this room, quote unquote, for an hour to get better and to learn is part of that process. But good points, Tom. Anybody else? All right. I gotta get myself a fish sandwich. Everybody have a good Friday.